Good evening, visitors, and welcome to the Australian War Memorial's Last Post ceremony. My name is Sharon Bown, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Air Force is Squadron Leader David Woods. We are honoured to acknowledge His Excellency Dr. István Mikola, Ambassador, Embassy of Hungary, accompanied by Dr. Marta Mátrei, Deputy of the Speaker of the Hungarian National Assembly, and Ms. Beatrix Kese, Deputy Director for the International Relations, Office of the Hungarian National Assembly. We are also honoured to acknowledge Major General Jonathan P. Braga, Commander, Special Operations Command, Pacific, Brigadier Benoit Chavannet, General Officer in charge of International Affairs, Army Staff, France, accompanied by Major General Anthony Rawlins, Deputy Chief of Army, Australia, and their accompanying delegations. We also warmly welcome the representatives from the Australian War College Army Reserve Command and Staff Course in attendance this evening. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that continue to serve, and the families that love and support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL and Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria and RSL Queensland, who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the pool of reflection by visitors and by students on behalf of the following schools. From New South Wales, St Joseph's School, Alstonville, Our Lady Help of Christians Primary School, Lismore South, and from Queensland, Ashgrove State School. If you are able, would you please stand and join in singing the national anthem? Students, please be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths and floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Lance Corporal John Logan. John Logan was born in 1889 in Ormiston, East Lothian, Scotland, the elder of two sons of John and Elizabeth Logan. He attended Ormiston Public School and was a keen soccer player. He was the goalkeeper for Ormiston Rangers Football Club and also played for Ormiston Star Football Club. Logan worked as a miner. In about 1911, at the age of 22, he immigrated to Thirroul on the New South Wales south coast. In December 1915, Logan enlisted in the Australian Imperial Force and trained at Liverpool Army Camp for 3 months. In March 1916, he embarked from Sydney on board the transport ship Star of England. Once in England, he undertook further training at the army camps on the Salisbury Plain. In September, he sailed for France to join his unit, the 18th Australian Infantry Battalion. Logan and his unit rotated between the front line and the rear areas, alternating between holding the line and undertaking training and sport behind the line. At this time, the AIF was preparing for its first European winter. As it happened, the Northern European winter of 1916 to 1917 was the coldest in living memory. In January 1917, Logan was promoted to the rank of Lance Corporal. During the spring of 1917, it became apparent that the Germans had carried out a strategic withdrawal from their forwardmost areas, back to a strong position known as the Hindenburg Line. The 18th Battalion was involved in following up this retreat and was involved in heavy fighting at Willencourt in February. In May, the 18th Battalion was engaged in taking a key part of the Hindenburg Line at Bullecourt. Though this second attempt to take the ruined village was successful, the Australian divisions that were involved suffered heavy casualties. Later, in 1917, the 18th Battalion moved north to Belgium to take part in the campaign to recapture the high ground in Flanders. The battalion fought in 2 of the battles, collectively known as the Third Battle of Ypres, in September at Menons Road and in October at Port Chapelle. Logan worked as a stretcher bearer in the battalion, a dangerous role that involved moving wounded soldiers back to medical stations, often through areas of heavy fighting. Logan's unit and the other men of the AIF remained in a relatively quiet sector of the French-Belgian border during the winter of 1917-1918. The AIF had suffered enormous casualties during 1917 and spent this time recovering and training for the year ahead. As the weather warmed up and the ground hardened, the static trench fighting of the previous year became a war of movement. In March 1918, the German army launched what would be its final major assault of the war, which became known as the German Spring Offensive. A key objective of the German forces in this attack was to capture the rail hub city of Amiens in order to split the British forces in the north from their French allies in the south. British and Australian forces managed to halt the offensive in April at the town of Villers-Bretonneux, less than 30 kilometres from Amiens. Logan and the 18th Battalion were stationed at the town to help stop the German advance. In the first week of April, the 18th Battalion was in the front line at Villers-Bretonneux, during which time the men were targeted by German artillery and machine gun fire. At the end of the week, the unit was relieved and the men moved to billets in the smaller village of Jontel, behind the front lines. The battalion's war diary note that this village's civilian population had evacuated in the face of the fighting, so there was plenty of straw for the men to sleep on, and the men had their first decent sleep for over a week. At 6 a.m. the next morning, the 9th of April 1918, the men were awoken by a German artillery barrage falling on the village of Jontel. During the barrage, Logan was struck by shrapnel and killed instantly, He was 29 years old. John Logan is buried in the Ingres Communal Cemetery extension in France, where over 550 Commonwealth soldiers of the First World War are buried or commemorated. His mother had a headstone inscribed with the epitaph, "Until we meet again." In Australia, John was survived by his fiancée, Sabina Ethel Victoria Round. In Scotland, he was survived by his mother, Elizabeth. She was struck a second blow in July that year when she received news that her other son, Private Peter Logan, of the 1st Battalion Gordon Highlanders, had also been killed in action on the Western Front. Lance Corporal Logan is listed on the honour roll on my right, among 62,000 Australians who died while serving in the First World War. A photograph of his headstone is displayed today beside the pool of reflection. This is but one of many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Lance Corporal John Logan, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall not grow old as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. We thank you all for visiting the Australian War Memorial, and we wish you all a very good evening. Thank you.